That night, Jake Miller came home a little later than usual. It was just past 10 p.m. when he stepped into the building, shoulders hunched under the weight of his laptop bag, his mind still spinning from a long, soul-crushing meeting. The hallway light flickered like it always did, and for a second, the quiet felt almost peaceful. Almost. But the moment he opened his mailbox, a quiet sigh slipped from his lip. No package, no small brown box, no delivery slip, just a UPS sticker slapped on the wall. Delivered to Unit 4C. Jake frowned. Apartment 4C? That was his neighbor, Nancy Greenfield. He didn't know much about her. She was quiet, mid-40s. The kind of person you nod to in an elevator, maybe say hi if you're feeling polite. He only knew two things for sure. She lived alone, and her husband had died a few years back. Since then, she'd kept mostly to herself. Climbing the stairs, Jake glanced at his phone. He had sent her a message a few minutes earlier. Hi, I think my package was dropped off at your place by mistake. Mind if I swing by to pick it up? Jake, 4B. No response. He waited. 10 minutes, then 15. He paced, looked at her door, then at his own. That box held a special adapter, one he absolutely needed for a presentation the next day. No adapter, no pitch. No pitch. Major problem. At 10:33 p.m., Jake told himself it wasn't that late. He took a breath, walked up to her door, and rang the bell. Once, ding-dong, then nothing. Silence. No footsteps, no creaking floorboards, not even a shadow behind the peephole, just stillness. Jake stood there awkwardly, waited a little longer, then shrugged, stepped back, and turned away. He didn't knock again. He didn't press his ear to the door. He didn't peek through the peephole. He just walked back to his apartment, one floor down, figuring he'd try again in the morning. What he didn't know was that this one harmless gesture, this one innocent ring of the doorbell, was about to spiral into something far more serious. Suspicion, fear, and a reputation shattered. That night, Nancy Greenfield had gone to bed a little earlier than usual. The soft ticking of the wall clock echoed through the stillness of her small third-floor apartment. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that settles into the corners like dust. 2 years a widow, Nancy lived alone with her aging Siamese cat, Rusty, curled up at her feet on a cushion that had seen better days. At exactly 10:28 p.m., the silence was broken. Ding-dong, just a doorbell. But in that hushed atmosphere, the sound hit her like an alarm. Nancy bolted upright on the couch, instantly alert. Her eyes darted to the door, brows furrowed. Wrong floor? Someone lost? Grabbing her cane, a souvenir from an old knee injury, she slowly made her way to the front door. The light from the living room stretched her shadow across the polished floor. Her heart was beating just a little too fast. She peered through the peephole. No one. Just the outline of a man's back, walking away down the dim hallway. Tall, slim. A stranger, at least she thought so. Was that the guy from 4B? She wasn't sure. Nancy didn't really know her neighbors. Some faces, a few names. Polite greetings in the elevator, nothing more. She stepped back slowly, quietly locked the door. Double latch. Then, a bit shaken, she shuffled to the kitchen and sipped some water. But something inside her wouldn't settle. The doorbell, the glimpse of a man, the late hour. It all sat wrong. Like a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit. Back in the living room, she picked up her phone. A message had come in 10 minutes earlier from an unknown number. Hi. I think my package might have been delivered to your apartment by mistake. Mind if I come by to pick it up? Jake, 4B. Nancy's throat tightened. Jake. The name rang a bell. He was the young man from the apartment below. Tech guy, maybe a designer, something like that. Always in a rush. Never rude, but never exactly warm either. She hadn't seen any package, hadn't signed for anything. She was certain of that. And even if it had been delivered, why come up at 10:30 at night? Why not just reply to the message? Why stand at her door like that? The more she thought about it, the more her mind spun. What if he'd tried the handle? What if there was no package at all? What if he knew she lived alone? She sat at the far end of the couch facing the door, turned off the TV, even killed the lights as if darkness could make her invisible. Her phone trembled in her hand. Call the kids? Number too far, too late. They just tell her she was overreacting, so instead she called the non-emergency line of the police. The voice on the other end was calm, professional. Nancy spoke quietly, choosing her words with care. She explained the doorbell, the time, the message, the man walking away in the hall. Ma'am, did he try to force entry? I don't think so. Number. But he rang. He stood there for a while. And I live alone. You understand? The officer took her name, her address, assured her someone would patrol the building later that night. Just a routine check. Nothing serious. But for Nancy, something had already shifted. The doubt was in. The safety was gone. She left the kitchen light on and locked the door. Twice. What Jake had thought was just a simple ring of the doorbell had quietly cracked open something deeper in Nancy. An old fear. The fear of not being safe. The fear of being alone. And maybe even vulnerable. The next morning, Jake woke up late. Sleep had only come around 2 a.m. after a frantic attempt to send his presentation without the adapter he never got. He was still thinking about that damn package when 3 knocks, sharp, heavy, official. He glanced at the time, 7:43 a.m. Frowning, he pulled on a t-shirt, shuffled to the door, peeked through the peephole. 2 silhouettes, navy blue uniforms. Police. He hesitated, then slowly opened the door. "Good morning, sir," said the first officer, a woman with sharp eyes and a calm, assertive voice. "Officer Reed, City Police Department. This is my partner, Officer Lopez. We received a call about an incident reported in this building last night. Mind if we come in for a moment?" Jake blinked, still half asleep. "An incident? What kind of incident?" "A report of suspicious behavior," Reed replied, flipping open a notepad. "Possible attempted intrusion. Around 10:30 p.m., Jake's stomach dropped. He opened the door wider. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered. I just rang my neighbor's doorbell. It was about a package that got delivered to her by mistake." The officers exchanged a glance. Officer Reed started jotting something down. "Do you know this neighbor personally?" "Not really," Jake said. "We barely talk. She lives alone. Nancy, I think. She didn't reply to my message, so I went up and rang the bell. Once. That's it." "Did you try to open the door?" asked Lopez. "Did you knock?" "No, of course not." Jake's voice rose. "I rang the bell once. Waited a moment. Then I left. That's all. I seriously don't see how that's a problem." Officer Lopez spoke again, more gently. "You know, some people live alone. They're vulnerable. Sometimes what feels like a small gesture to you that can be interpreted very differently by someone else." Jake exhaled, somewhere between frustrated and stunned. "So what? You ring a doorbell now and people call the cops?" Reed straightened, signaling the conversation was nearing its end. "Sir, no one is accusing you of anything. But when someone files a report, we're required to follow up. The resident said she was scared. She showed us your message and identified you. Now, if you're confirming that you didn't try to enter, and your only intention was to retrieve a misdelivered package, then we'll log this as a misunderstanding. But going forward, if she asks for no contact, respect that." Jake nodded slowly, hands on his hips, still trying to process it all. "You know what scares me?" he said quietly. "That a person's reputation can be wrecked over a misunderstanding." The officers thanked him, noted his version of events, and left. Jake closed the door behind them. Slowly, his eyes landed on the UPS sticker still clinging to the hallway wall. He sank onto the edge of his couch, breath shallow. That morning, Jake learned something that stuck with him. In a hyper-connected world, being right no longer guaranteed being safe. It wasn't just about a package anymore. It was about fear and how quickly it could spread. How easily it could twist a simple moment into something dangerous, something contagious. Meanwhile, in her pale yellow kitchen upstairs, Nancy Greenfield sat alone, holding Jake's letter in both hands. The paper trembled slightly as she read it, then read it again. Once, twice, and she didn't believe a word. To Nancy, the letter wasn't an apology. It was a tactic, a thin disguise, something a guilty man would write in a crime show right before doing something worse. She'd seen it before. Those neat, polite men with dark intentions, hiding behind soft voices and harmless smiles. She watched enough detective dramas to know how it worked. And that is when it all began. It started small. In the shared laundry room during a casual chat with Elaine, the widow from 2A. "You know, Elaine," Nancy began, her voice quiet but pointed. "Something very strange happened the other night. Someone tried to get into my apartment. I was terrified. It was that young man, Jake, from 4B. Elaine's eyes widened. "Are you sure?" "He seems nice." Nancy gave a tight, knowing smile. "That's what they always say. But I heard the doorknob jiggle. It was 10:30 at night. Who does that? And then he left me this weird letter." Then came the elevator, a whisper between neighbors. Then the lobby. A story told with hesitation and just enough drama to spark curiosity. Feigned embarrassment, a lowered voice, a shake of the head. Soon, what started as a harmless ring of a doorbell became a neighborhood rumor. The story mutated. He rang once became, he was knocking over and over. I felt nervous became, I thought he was going to break in. And just like that, without knowing it, Jake Carson became the topic of hushed conversations in stairwells and mailrooms. The looks began to change. One morning, as Jake stepped out to get his mail, he passed Mr. Rodriguez, the friendly guy who always had a story to tell. But this time, Rodriguez avoided his gaze and kept walking. Later that day, at the basement gym, a woman quickly packed up her things and left the moment Jake walked in. But it was when he overheard two teenage girls whispering in the lobby. "That's him, right? The guy who tried to break into Mrs. Greenfield's place?" That it hit him. Somehow, silently, he'd become the villain in a story he never meant to be part of. What hurt the most wasn't the stares. It was the silence. From the building management. Jake had explained everything. He had even written a calm, respectful email to the property manager, hoping to clear the air, hoping for something. But no one responded. He hadn't yelled. He hadn't forced anything. He hadn't broken the law. Yet now there was a label stuck to his name, a man to be wary of, a shadow in the hallway no one said hello to anymore, an awkward presence avoided in the elevator. Jake could feel the walls closing in. His own apartment felt different, like it didn't belong to him anymore, like he didn't belong there. And the truth, he hadn't done anything. But in places like this, it's not about what you did. It's about what people think you did. Jake Carson had always considered himself a quiet man. No drama, no enemies, just a peaceful life. But lately, something had started to burn inside him. Not rage, not even resentment. It was clarity. He needed to understand. Why had one ring of a doorbell at 10:30 p.m. been enough to turn him into a pariah in a building he once called home? Then came the note. A folded piece of paper slipped under his door. No name, no explanation. Just 4 trembling words scribbled in shaky handwriting. Watch out for her. He read it dozens of times, left it on his nightstand, then moved it to his desk, then the kitchen counter. And every time he tried to forget about it, it found him again, like a whisper that refused to die. Jake had had enough. He sat at his laptop, a black coffee in one hand, the cold blue glow of the screen on his face. He typed, Nancy Greenfield. Nothing unusual came up. Former librarian, widowed, gardening enthusiast. A few old municipal photos, smiling, beige cardigan, standing between rows of books. It didn't fit. Not with the fear she had planted in his life. Then he searched. Howard Greenfield. Her late husband. And there it was. A short article from 2019 in the local paper. The body of Howard Greenfield, 72, was found at his Brookfield home. Initial reports indicate an accidental fall. A concerned neighbor contacted authorities after not seeing him for several days. No signs of forced entry. The case was closed. The word accidental flashed in Jake's mind. And that line, a concerned neighbor. Who was that neighbor? What had they seen? And was there ever an autopsy? Any investigation? Any suspicion? That night, Jake barely slept. The next morning, he went to the property office, pretending to inquire about lost mail. While the receptionist rummaged through some folders, he scanned the desk behind her. Names, leases, photocopies. He spotted Nancy's file, didn't touch it, just read. Nancy Greenfield, Unit 4A. Resident since 2006. Owner. Owner. That word hit different. She wasn't just a tenant, she belonged here. She had roots. And maybe that's why she acted like she controlled who stayed and who didn't. Later, Jake crossed paths with the building's janitor, Carl, mid-50s. Gruff but approachable. Jake tried a soft approach. Hey, Carl. You've known Mrs. Greenfield a long time, right? Carl paused, wiping his hands on a towel. Nancy? Oh, yeah, since she moved in. She was different back then. Kinder, talkative. But after her husband passed, she changed. Got real guarded. Paranoid about safety. Jake hesitated. Do you think she imagines things? Carl went quiet. Then finally said, Look, between us, there was something a few years back. A young woman moved in across the hall, stayed barely 3 months. Nancy accused her of stealing mail. Girl left soon after. Carl shrugged. But hey, not my business. Jake thanked Carl quietly and went back to his apartment, even more disturbed than before. Was he just the latest in a long list? Was she unstable or calculated? For 2 weeks now, he hadn't dared greet anyone in the elevator. Every glance felt like a silent accusation. The hallway itself seemed to whisper behind his back. He was done. That night, Jake made a decision. He began collecting everything: texts, screenshots, voice recordings, even the video history from his Nest doorbell. He wanted facts, evidence, a timeline, and he wasn't alone. One evening, while taking out the trash, a quiet figure approached him in the dim parking lot. Elaine, from 3C. Soft-spoken, large glasses, eyes that never quite settled in one place. Jake, I know it's not really my business, she whispered, but I think you should know. Nancy talks about you. A lot, to everyone, and it's not good. Jake turned toward her, heart already pounding. She says you're unstable, that you're spying on her, that you're trying to steal from her. I haven't said anything, but I don't believe her. His breath caught. This wasn't gossip anymore. This was defamation. Elaine continued. I had a problem with her last year. She accused me of stealing a basil plant off her balcony. I laughed at first, but then she started ringing my doorbell every morning at 7 a.m. for 2 weeks straight, just to ask for answers. I ended up buying a new basil plant just to make her stop. Jake gave a tight, bitter smile. His first ally. That night, he sat down at his desk, opened a new folder on his laptop. Title, Greenfield, Suspicious Behavior. He made himself a promise. He would fight back. Jake Carson had spent his life holding back, out of principle, out of caution, out of the naive belief that reason always wins in the end. But that night, as he lay awake staring into the darkness of his bedroom, he realized peace wasn't coming, not on its own. If balance was going to be restored, he'd have to bring it himself. At 3:42 a.m., he got out of bed without a sound. In the living room, he opened a drawer and pulled out a small brown box he had ordered 2 weeks earlier. He hadn't told anyone, not even Elaine. Until now, he hadn't dared, but tonight it was necessary. He opened it carefully. Inside, a micro-security camera, cloud storage, night vision, motion detection, silent, invisible. The perfect eye. He mounted it above his own door, angled precisely to catch the hallway. Nancy's door, just a few feet away, fit perfectly in frame. He set the camera, recording from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. Footage saved to a private drive. No one else would see it, unless he wanted them to. For 3 days, he didn't check the footage. He wanted material. But more than that, he was afraid of what he might find. On the fourth night, rain hammered the windows. Jake sat on the couch, notebook in hand, remote on the table. He opened the files. Gray-tinted corridors, flickering overhead lights, people coming and going, nothing unusual. Until Thursday, 10:33 p.m. A figure, slim, beige coat, slow steps. Nancy. Jake froze. She walked up to his door, paused, then lifted her hand and ran it gently along the doorknob, like she was feeling for something. Then she leaned in, placed her ear against the wood, stayed there, still, listening. Then slowly turned her head, scanned the hallway, and walked away. Jake paused the footage, rewound it, played it again and again. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't curiosity. It was a pattern. He spent the next few nights going through more clips. Sometimes she just passed his door. Other times, she slowed, stopped, rested her hand against the wall, stared like she was searching for a crack. And then came Saturday, March 2nd. Jake had gone out to dinner with coworkers. He didn't come home until midnight. But at 9:58 p.m., Nancy appeared in the hallway, with a rag in her hand, pretending to clean. She reached his door, bent down, slid something under it, then crouched there, staring through the bottom gap, for several long seconds, then rose, and walked off like nothing had happened. Jake hit pause, zoomed in. A thin object. A letter? A folded newspaper? He rushed to his door, nothing. He checked the shoe rack, lifted the doormat, rummaged through the recycling bin, and finally, wedged in the frame's edge, he found it. A small folded piece of paper. Silent, unseen, left like a trap. He unfolded the paper. The handwriting was shaky. Ink smudged and fading. But the words were clear. You don't belong here. This is my home. I won't go through it again. I won't let you do this to me. Jake stood motionless, the note clutched in his hand, frozen in place. Go through what again? I won't let you do this. Was she mistaking him for someone else, or was she reliving something from her past? He didn't know. But one thing was certain now. She wasn't just whispering behind his back. She was taking action. That night, Jake printed still frames from the footage. Dated, annotated, chronologically organized. February 22nd, first surveillance footage. February 25th, eavesdropping at the door. February 28th, silent attempt at the doorknob. March 2nd, threatening message slipped under the door. The next morning, he met with Elaine. He showed her the clips. Her eyes widened in shock. She does this every night? Yes, Jake said. And I think she needs help. But until that happens, I need protection. Elaine gently rested a hand on his shoulder. You're not alone, Jake. Not this time. Monday morning. Jake Carson woke up with a kind of icy resolve in his eyes. No more hiding, no more hoping it would stop. He grabbed the folder he'd built page by page, capture by capture, and headed downstairs. The building lobby smelled faintly of burnt coffee and cheap disinfectant, an ordinary morning completely out of sync with the storm building inside him. Behind the plexiglass desk, Marjorie, the building manager, barely looked up. Morning, Jake. Heating issue again? Number. But I need to talk to you in private. He placed the folder flat on the counter like a piece of evidence in a courtroom. Marjorie's brows lifted. She led him into the small back office, closed the door behind them. Inside, Jake unlocked his tablet and pressed play. March 2nd. Nancy. Crouched, sliding a note under his door, lingering, listening, silent, obsessed. Then another clip. Nancy, her ear against Jake's door. Still, unblinking. Marjorie's face drained of color. This is recent? Every clip is from the past 2 weeks, Jake replied. And this... He pulled the letter from his pocket, now laminated. Was left for me like some kind of warning. I don't know what she thinks I've done, but I'm scared she's slipping into something dangerous. Marjorie fidgeted at her keyboard, opened a private file, then looked at him. Jake, what I'm about to say stays between us, okay? I'm listening. Her voice dropped. Nancy's lived on that floor for 10 years. Back in 2017, there was an incident with another tenant, young guy like you, quiet, kind. His name was Evan Miller. Jake tensed. What happened to him? She started accusing him of bizarre things. Said he was sneaking into her apartment while she was out. That he was stealing her photos. Watching her through the vents. She insisted he was stalking her. Jake leaned forward. His stomach turned. And? One night she called the police, screaming that Evan had tried to strangle her. In her dreams, Jake. In her dreams. She paused. Her voice shook slightly. I still remember his face. So calm, so tired. He looked at me and said, I don't want to end up in the papers. And the next day, he was gone. Jake sat back, cold seeping into his spine. The pieces were falling into place. Nancy was replaying the same nightmare, only this time with him as the target. Was she ever evaluated? Mental health services? Anyone involved? Marjorie hesitated. We tried. Her sister lives out of state. We contacted her. But Nancy refused any help. And legally, unless she poses a direct threat. She shrugged, helpless. Jake stood up. Anger simmered in his chest, but beneath it, something deeper. Sadness, exhaustion. I've been patient, way too patient. But now she's threatening my safety, my name. I want an official response. Either you bring in a mediator or I'm bringing in my lawyer. Marjorie gave a slow, deliberate nod. I'll summon Nancy, formally, and I'll be there with a representative from the board. Jake closed the folder in his hands. Good. But if she accuses me of anything again, I go public. I have more than enough to prove harassment. He turned on his heels. In the lobby, a few neighbors chatted quietly near the mailboxes. One of them glanced at him with a curious, unreadable expression. His name was already bruised, but Jake had something Nancy didn't. Proof and clarity. That night, he returned home. Before switching off the lights, he checked his cameras one last time. Everything was working. Then, for the first time in weeks, he closed his eyes without fear. But he knew. The hardest part was still ahead. Thursday, 3 p.m. sharp. Jake Carson walked into the small conference room inside the management office. The walls were bare and pale, washed in harsh fluorescent light that gave the entire space a sickly tone. A plain rectangular table sat at the center. 4 chairs. Marjorie was already seated, notepad in hand. Next to her sat Michael Green, the board representative and building mediator. Thin, wire-rimmed glasses. Calm to the point of clinical. Jake took a seat, the file of evidence on his lap. He placed a small audio recorder in the center of the table. Nothing left to chance. A few minutes later, Nancy entered. She wore a blue floral-patterned blazer, her silver hair pulled tightly into a chignon. She paused at the doorway, scanned the room, then walked in and sat without a word. Her handbag hit the floor with a heavy thud, almost theatrical. Jake felt it instantly. The performance, like she'd rehearsed every line. Michael spoke first. Thank you both for coming. We're here today to address recent concerns and to clarify events in a space of mutual respect and understanding. Nancy raised her hand. Can I go first? Of course, Michael replied. She folded her arms. I've lived here much longer than Mr. Carson, and ever since he moved in, I've felt unsafe. He lingers in the hallway. He tries to intimidate me. He even attempted to break into my apartment in the middle of the night. Jake remained still, calm, waiting. Michael turned toward her. Do you have any evidence to support those claims? Nancy shook her head confidently. I can feel him. It's not just a hunch. It's real. He watches me, waits for me. He left a strange box outside my door once. When I opened it, it was empty. Marjorie's eyes flicked toward Michael. Uneasy. Jake said nothing. Instead, he reached for the tablet. Pressed play. Set it gently on the table. Clip 1. Nancy crouched outside his door, sliding a note under it. Clip 2. Nancy pressed flat against the wood, ear to the surface, unmoving. Silence. Nancy turned pale. You're not allowed to film me like that. That's illegal. Not in my own doorway, Jake said, voice firm. It's fully compliant with state law, and I notified management after the first incident. I never tried to force your door. I rang your bell once, at 10:30 p.m., to collect a package addressed to me. I even texted beforehand. He pulled out his phone, showed the message log, date, time. Polite tone. Nancy recoiled, visibly shaken. Her hands trembled on the armrest of the chair. Michael spoke again, his voice calm but unwavering. Mrs. Caldwell, there is no evidence supporting your accusations. On the contrary, everything we've seen points to a misunderstanding, one that could have been avoided. Marjorie let out a quiet sigh. Nancy, this isn't the first time. You did the same thing with Evan Miller. Remember? Nancy clenched her jaw. A vein pulsed at her temple. Evan was dangerous. Jake tilted his head slightly. Or maybe you're just afraid of being alone, afraid of people moving on, living their lives without you. So you create enemies out of shadows, just to feel noticed. But what you're doing, it's harassment. Nancy stood up so fast her chair scraped the floor. I am the victim here, she shouted. I'm a woman living alone. I have a right to feel afraid. Michael cut in, voice firmer now. What you don't have the right to do is accuse without evidence, stir up fear in the building, or invent stories that could seriously damage someone's life. If the police had acted on your claims, Jake could have lost a lot more than just a package. A heavy silence fell over the room. Nancy slowly sank back into her seat. For the first time, her gaze wasn't sharp or accusing. It drifted, lost, haunted. As if in that moment, she realized she had gone too far. Or worse, that she no longer knew where the line even was. Michael concluded, Here's what we're going to do. Nancy, you will receive a formal written warning. Any further behavior involving surveillance, false accusations, or provocation will result in disciplinary action. Jake, your complaint will be documented and filed. If anything happens again, the matter will be escalated to the authorities. Nancy didn't argue. She stood, slowly like someone hollowed out. And as she walked toward the door, she whispered, I just wanted someone to see me. Jake stayed in his seat, thoughtful. The anger had dulled, not forgotten, but replaced by something softer. Compassion, not forgiveness. Just understanding. The days that followed moved slowly. At Roosevelt Heights, the hallways grew quiet again. No more whispers behind closed doors. No more sidelong glances in the elevator. Just the soft sound of footsteps on worn carpet and the scent of morning coffee drifting through the cracks. Jake Carson kept to his routine, came and went. But Nancy was nowhere to be seen. Some neighbors said she'd gone to stay with her sister in Albany. Others claimed she hadn't left her apartment in days, shades drawn tight. But one thing was certain, the paranoia had gone still. The storm had passed, for now. 2 weeks later, Saturday morning, Jake opened his door, and there it was, a small box on his doormat, plain, unmarked, sealed with brown tape. He hesitated, then picked it up. Inside, a paperback copy of The Great Gatsby, his favorite, the one he thought he'd lost during the move. And tucked inside, an envelope, handwritten, for Jake. He opened it. The paper trembled faintly in his fingers. I've realized that fear can be a prison, one we build ourselves brick by brick, with suspicion, silence, and blame. I built mine without meaning to, and you almost paid for it. I can't undo what I said, I can't undo what I did, but I want you to know, I'm sorry. This isn't an excuse, just an admission. That sometimes the wounds inside us turn innocent people into ghosts we think we recognize. Thank you for not yelling. Thank you for not lying. I'm returning your book. I hope you keep living without fear. Jake read it 3 times, then gently folded it and slid it between the pages of the book. It wasn't closure, but it was something. A flicker of light, a crack in the wall, a start. At the next tenants' meeting, Nancy wasn't there. Marjorie announced quietly that she had requested a transfer to another building, closer to family. No one asked questions. And then one morning, like clockwork, Jake woke at 7 o'clock. The sun filtered weakly through the curtains. He stepped out of bed, walked slowly to the front door,